Welcome to Backstage with Becca with special guest, Mary Kate Moore. Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Backstage with Becca B. On this episode, this Oklahoma City University graduate from Nebraska has been seen on the 2016 tour of Into the Woods, the national tour of Les Mis as Fantine, Broadway's recent revival of Into the Woods, where she covered multiple roles and made her Broadway debut as the baker's wife. And she can currently be seen on the tour of MJ the Musical as Rachel. Please welcome Kate Moore. Well, how are you today? First of all.
Good. I'm good. Today's like a catch-up day for me here in Los Angeles. So I'm gonna be running some errands and getting some groceries and all that kind of stuff. It's like an adult day, but it's been good.
Mm-hmm. We love adulting. It's
like
what are you doing today? Going to the grocery store and cleaning?
Yes, doing laundry, all of the above. Yeah.
Entertainment. Yeah, all the entertaining stuff. So since this is a theater show I want to get into, have you always known you wanted to be a theater performer? And when was the moment that you realized?
Oh gosh. I think that I have. I think I have always known, but it's hard for me to fully commit to that answer because I don't think that I allowed myself the sort of the grace to say yes, this is what I'm going to do until I got towards the end of high school and was deciding what major I wanted to study in school. That felt like the turning point. I don't think that I really even understood that I could be a musical theater performer as a career until I was in junior high, and kind of saw my first musicals, first professional productions. And that was the moment where I was like, oh, people do this. How crazy. And I come from a family of artists, but they're also all very practical people. So I think that the fear of choosing something that was going to be difficult and atypical as far as career choices go was always sort of in the back of my head until it came to the point where I was like, okay, am I going to school for journalism or am I going to school for musical theater? And that was the moment where I was like, I got to try. I got to give it a shot and see how it goes. And it's been going pretty well so far. So that's good.
It has been. It has been. When was the moment that you yourself realized that you had the talent to definitely make it a career and
oh gosh. I mean, I think I've always just known that there was something special going on in my vocal cords. I've always just sort of thought I can do things that other people or that the average person can't really do. And I come from a musical family as well. So I was singing when I was young. And I think I always knew that I needed to be able to incorporate that into my life somehow. And being a singer can look so many different ways. For me, it just happens to be musical theater. But I think it was this is so funny. I was such a little athlete when I was younger. And so I would spend all summer long going to sports camps and a basketball camp at this university and a volleyball camp with my team over here this week. And there was one summer that I went to. I'm from Nebraska, and I went to the Nebraska basketball girls camp for a week, and we were being taught and coached by the players from the team. And at one point, I don't know how this happened. I can't remember if I was just humming to myself or something. I don't know. But somebody was like, oh, you're a good singer. And then all of a sudden it just became this thing that I was the singer at the camp. And it went from being in all my off time, people would come up to me and be like, will you sing something? Sing that thing again, sing this. And it was really it was a moment like that where I thought, maybe I shouldn't be spending so much time playing basketball. Maybe I should be singing. This is clearly what people want to be seeing and hearing and experiencing from me. So I feel like it was that. And then the next year I got my first solo in church. And then being able to actually perform for people as opposed to just randomly on a basketball court somewhere sing a little, I don't even know what I was singing, probably fucking Celine Dion or something like that. But yeah, just to sing for a group of people that's there just to hear you sing. And I thought that was really fun. I want to do that again.
Yes. Oh my God, when you said Celine Dion, my mind jumped to Titanic. And I'm like,
Haven't seen it. I haven't seen it, but I am dying to because it looks like quite an experience.
Oh my gosh, I saw it like back in its beginning stages when it was in
Yeah.
LA, and it's just like it's crazy how far it's come since then.
Yeah. Well, rightfully so. It seems like it's so good.
It yes, yes, the comedic genius is amazing. Well, now that's in
Love
my
that.
head. So
Okay. Well, you're welcome.
nah,
Hmm.
I'm gonna manifest, do some manifesting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
I appreciate you.
yes. So, how did you choose? You went to school in Oklahoma, I saw,
I
which is fun.
did.
My
I
sisters
did.
went to school in Oklahoma, not the same school, but they went to.
Okay.
So, how did
Amazing.
you choose to go to school in Oklahoma to do music, like to study musical theater?
It feels kind of like it was just an accident. And looking back on it, I'm so glad that it happened that way because it just very clear to me in hindsight that it was where I was supposed to be. But I knew that I wanted to do musical theater, but my parents and I were just like completely lost at sea with how to go about doing that. And this was now, oh gosh, 2009 that I was looking for school. So I'm sure that the process for going to a musical theater college or a conservatory is completely different now. But for us back then, it was just like reaching out to any possible resources that we had that were involved with music in Nebraska. And so randomly, the man who taught my parents music in high school, like they went to high school together, and their high school music teacher is pretty like on the pulse of music in the state of Nebraska where I'm from. And he just randomly was like, I've heard good things about this school down in Oklahoma City. So maybe you should go check it out. And it was really just on his urging that we did that. And I got some advice from some other people that were like involved in theater and stuff in Nebraska too. So it wasn't the only place that I auditioned and did the whole application process, but I did a lot of visiting too. Like I went and visited a lot of the schools, and I stayed mostly in the Midwest because I didn't want to be too far from home. And luckily there are plenty of really great musical theater schools in the middle of the country somehow. I
Oh,
don't know how that
yes.
works out, but there are a lot of them, and OCU was one. We really just like went down there kind of on a whim and visited, my mom and I auditioned. We were there for a weekend, for like a visit weekend slash audition, and I auditioned and it went really well. And then they were giving me a tour. One of the like student advisors was giving me a tour, and the campus was incredible. And I was like, I kind of like it here. This place is cool. And then they took me up to their office and we were just chatting, and they were like, well, here is the academic list, the classes for this coming year. Do you just want to get registered now? And I was like, oh,
Oh my God.
um, I guess so. Sure. Okay, well, let's just see what you got in the class catalog. And then I a couple of days later ended up getting a really great talent and academic scholarship. And it all just sort of like fell into place. So I think and that has just been like the theme of my life, what things just sort of like kind of happen the way they're supposed to. And when that happens, I just try not to fight it. And so there I was. And then I'm going to school in Oklahoma City. So that's really kind of it. It was a happy accident.
Well, it's like everything happens for a reason type
It
thing.
does. It really does. It
Yeah.
always does. Hmm.
You don't know at the time why, but like,
Yeah, but you find
yeah.
out later. You do find out later. Yeah. And it was
Yes.
a really great school for me. So,
Oh, and there's so many like talented people that are like on tours on Broadway that have like
mhm.
gone to school in Oklahoma, which
Yeah,
people don't realize that
totally.
Oklahoma has these programs
Yeah, yeah, they
of all
do. They really do. And, Oklahoma City specifically was a pretty great place to live for 4 years. So
places.
it
Yes.
was nice. Yeah.
Like change in pace, me. Yeah.
Definitely. And I
Yeah.
think that even though Oklahoma City, the vibe feels similar to my hometown, just leaving Nebraska and going to school, I think was a really great lesson for me, a really great experience to have before moving to New York after I graduated. So it's sort of like the gentle stepping stones to becoming a city girl,
To being
which,
like
yeah,
independent too, I feel like because
totally.
you're so young when you go into college, it's
Yeah,
crazy.
you really are. You really are. And you're still like really in a developmental part of your life too. So it was
Definitely.
wild. It was a wild transition. I feel like it was almost harder to transition from high school to college than it was from college to New York.
Yes.
But
Oh my God. No,
yeah.
that totally tracks, I feel like.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when did you move to New York after college, and how did you start like getting into the auditioning process and like
Mm.
making connections out there? Because I mean, it is like kind of like I feel like musical theater at the community is like small in a way, but it's also big.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think that the pool of regularly working actors is small, but then outside of that, the number of people who are there in New York trying to make it happen and going to open calls and stuff, that is a really large community of people. Um, I graduated in 2013, and I spent a couple of months at home in Nebraska, and then I moved to New York in August of 2013 just for a month. I sublet an apartment in Astoria because I had a contract back at in Oklahoma City at Lyric Theater of Oklahoma to do Rocky Horror Picture Show. It was so fun.
Way
Just like
iconic.
yeah, just like a little month and a half long contract. So I was only in New York for like I think it was a month or a month and a half from August to sometime in September. Came back to Oklahoma City, did the show. And while I was doing the show in Oklahoma, a couple of my friends from Nebraska had just moved to New York and they were like, hey, we're looking for a third roommate in this apartment. Would you want to join the lease when you're done with Rocky Horror? And I was like, of course, the timing here is perfect. So that's when I kind of made the permanent move. That first little month was just sort of dipping my toe in the water. And then yeah, I was there permanently from October of 2013 on, and uh, I just started doing as many open calls as I possibly could. I did not move to the city with an agent because my school did this crazy thing where they cast you in the showcase. Most of the schools that you go to, if you make it to your senior year, you are automatically in showcase, and then you get to go to New York City and before you graduate and perform in this showcase for a bunch of agents with the hope that someone will sign you before you move. And I didn't get cast, so I didn't get to go and do that, which was kind of crazy. Um, but then I went once I got to New York, I was like, okay, well, there are agents here. I can find one on my own. I don't need my school's showcase to make it happen for me. So
Yeah.
started looking into some different things. I don't honestly don't even know if they still exist, but there was something called Actors Connection then, where you would have these agent nights. And you could pay, which, that's sort of the downside of the
Yeah.
industry, but you pay a certain amount of money and then you get to go into this room and have like a little master class with this agent. And then each person gets 2 or 3 minutes to sing some stuff or do a monologue or whatever it might be. So I got my agent through one of those, my first agent, and they were semi helpful in getting me some auditions and appointments and things like that I wouldn't have been able to get on my own. But for the most part, it was just all me, like
Yeah.
spending as much time on playbill.com, on backstage.com, finding all of the open calls and the auditions. I went to New York with some EMC points, so I was able to sometimes be seen at equity auditions. Yeah, and the first job that I booked was doing Grizabella in Cats on a cruise ship. That was in 2015.
Oh my
And
God.
it's wild. It's so wild. But the casting director was a man named Duncan Stewart, who at the time was the co-owner of Stewart Whitley Casting. And they do a decent amount of stuff in New York. They do a decent amount of stuff outside of New York. I think now he works for something that's like ARC Casting, I believe. They've disbanded Stewart Whitley, but he was just such an invaluable person to kind of have in my corner after that Cats audition, because the next professional audition that I got after Cats, the next job that I booked really was the Into the Woods tour in 2016.
Yeah.
And I know that I got that job because I made an impression on him in my Cats audition. So it is kind of fun now after, gosh, over 10 years in the industry to sort of look back and see how everything kind of
Nice.
connects.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it really wasn't, it took me about 2 years to get the Cats job. I was just like auditioning and meeting people and singing for free in little workshops of things. And trying to go to as many auditions as I could and working a couple different survival jobs. And yeah.
You're like, I'm gonna make this happen for me.
Yeah. And there were definitely some days where I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do this anymore, but I'm glad that I stuck it out, at least in that part of my career. It was beneficial to just not leave New York and to hunker down and try to get to as many auditions as I could. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, I could totally, I would die to see you as Grizabella.
There are YouTube videos, so go ahead and look it up.
So good. Would you ever have like done that role again?
I loved doing cats. And what's nice about Grizz is that it doesn't require anything but a singing voice, really. So until the day that I die, if I can hobble across the stage and sing Memory, I could play that role. So I would love to do it again someday. I honestly had such a good time. Yes. It was so fun.
I like selfishly want it to happen.
Well, we're speaking it into existence right now. It's, you know, in another 5 to 10 years, there's gonna need to be a tour or a remount on Broadway. So I'll just do it then.
Exactly. And I'll probably forget by that time that like the cats like go through the audience and give everyone jump scares.
That they do, yeah.
No one told me that, and it was so cruel.
It's cool and terrifying.
Own makeup for cats too.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, I learned, obviously we were on a cruise ship, so I kind of thought like, oh, well, we're gonna get the shaft when it comes to a lot of this stuff because we're floating out in the middle of the ocean. But it's that way in every professional production of the show because there are just too many people. Like, can you imagine how many makeup artists they would need backstage to do everyone's makeup every night? So you have to learn in rehearsals before we got onto the ship. We had like 2 or 3 days with a makeup artist that Angela Lloyd Webber's office sent to us to show us the plot and like have us practice. It was wild.
That's insane. So you have to be an artist like on like too. You have to be
kind of. And you know, some people are more adept at that kind of thing than others, which means that the people who weren't as adept at it would be getting to the theater like 2 hours before the show started to start on their makeup. Or like, you know, the couple that plays Caricapat and Tantamile, they have those wigs with the stripes on them and then their makeup matches the stripes, so they would have to like measure everything out in their makeup plot so that it would line up. Those two were always doing their makeup the longest.
Oh my god, like props to everyone who's been in Cats, because I would kind of have a panic attack trying to apply makeup. That'd be the scariest part of doing the whole show for me.
You get used to it after a while, honestly, and then it just gets real quick. Quick and lazy, but
muscle memory, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So speaking of Into the Woods, I want to talk about Into the Woods, which has played a big part in your life recently.
Huge.
Oh my gosh. Did you, like, when you first went in for Into the Woods, was it a show that you were like, I want to like be in this like multiple production down the road or something? Or was it just like, okay, I got this, like that's cool? It's not
gosh, so the first time that I did Into the Woods was at school, actually. It was the very last show that I did before I graduated in the spring of 2013. And so I guess that was a little bit of foreshadowing, but I would not have known that at the time. And while I was on the cruise ship was when Duncan Stewart from Stuart Whitley messaged me in an email and was like, hey, we're casting this tour of Into the Woods. It was Fiasco Theater Productions version of the show, and they had just done it at Roundabout on Broadway. And it was a really cool, like super devised version of the show where there were only 9 actors on stage, and they stayed on stage the whole time. And everyone played multiple little roles and cycled through being the narrator and would throw on a different costume piece when it was time for them to play a different role. And we also didn't have an orchestra, so there were little bits and pieces of the show where people were instrumentally talented within the company and would step forward and like play a little something. I luckily didn't have to do any of the heavy lifting with that. I played like a toy piano every once in a while and like a little glockenspiel and like a
But
triangle.
still.
But yeah, it was we did have to join the musicians union in order to be in the show, which made me laugh. But so I got this email, it was like, hey, we're casting this tour. We're looking specifically for offstage standbys. Can you put some of this material on tape? So I remember like going to the cabaret lounge in the cruise ship because it was like had the best lighting and filming this audition and sending it in and not hearing anything back. And I got off the cruise ship. We finished our contract and I came back to New York and messaged Duncan and was like, hey, I haven't heard anything about that tape that I sent you. How's the casting process going? Have they found these standbys? And he was like, no, they haven't. I think it would be best if you came into the room. If we actually physically had you into audition. And I do remember the audition being so stressful because it was, clearly as a standby, you need to be able to play multiple roles. And so I had to prepare 3 different roles. And it wasn't just, with Sondheim in particular, it's really hard to audition just a cut of something. So I was singing the entire song of multiple different characters and like doing entire scenes. And it was just so much material that I studied so hard. I crammed for. I like had some coaching sessions with a friend of mine who had done Into the Woods with me at school and to like try to get me prepared. And I knew as soon as I walked out of that audition, I was like, I booked this. I'm going to get it. I can tell just from the energy. And I did, and it was great. Me and 3 other offstage covers, and each one of us was responsible for 3 principal roles. I was covering, it was wild. I was covering The Witch, The Baker's Wife, and Cinderella. And I went on for all 3. I remember made my debut as The Baker's Wife at the Kennedy Center in DC, which also was foreshadowing, I think, because that's what happened on Broadway. But I remember just being like, in a state of complete nervous system shutdown. For 3 full hours, I don't know where I was, who I was, what I was doing, but I said all the lines and I was in all the places I was supposed to be. And I played the little triangle and I did all the things. And that experience, just because it wasn't just the show, it was also the devised version of the show. So I wasn't just responsible for these 3 roles. I was responsible for moving set pieces and playing instruments and sometimes being the narrator and sometimes playing a different little role. And it was wild. It was like Sondheim boot camp, truly. And it was so hard. It was so hard. Me and my fellow standbys, we were practicing all the time backstage. Like we really didn't give ourselves the chance to relax into it until maybe the last 2 or 3 months of the tour, because we just couldn't. There was too much material. But that experience is what set me up for Into the Woods on Broadway, because when City Center came around and Into the Woods was going to be happening with that all-star crazy company of people that they had there at Encores, I remember seeing an advertisement for it like a year before it was going to happen, thinking, oh my gosh, it would be so cool. Even just to see that production, but to be in it would be so wild. And I had moved back to New York after the pandemic, was like working odd jobs and feeling really disconnected from the industry, and had a couple of auditions, but not too many. And my agent called me one day and was like, hey, I just want to let you know that you're up for a job that you haven't auditioned for. And I was like, what would that be? Oh. And he said they apparently at Encores, they have never before hired offstage coverage because Encores is only ever maybe a week or 2 weeks of performances. But COVID changed the landscape of that. And so now, of course, they have to hire understudies and people off stage to keep the show going if people were to test positive. So I guess that the casting team at Telsey had reached out to all of the agents that they knew and trusted and were like, hey, we need standbys, we need coverage for this show. And my agent was like, I have just the person. I have exactly the person for this job. She's already been an offstage cover for a production of Into the Woods for a long period of time. So I got it. I didn't even have to audition. Oh my God. Isn't that crazy? It's so wild. I remember walking into the first day of rehearsal and like Sarah Bareilles and Gavin Creel and Neil Patrick Harris and Heather Headley and just being like, what is going on? You're like, I'm in this room. This is crazy. And so for the Encores production, I was responsible for every female role in the show, which is crazy. I did not end up having to go on, which is, I mean, that's the whole reason that I was there, in the hopes that that wouldn't happen, but they were protected just in case it did. That show was still going on. We had just done our first week of shows, and I got a call from my agent on the Monday that we had off before the second
They were
week
like,
that was like, hey, you're going to be on Broadway. And I was like, what?
oh my God.
Yeah, he just said they're transferring. I think they've known since the beginning of rehearsals because the show sold so well at City
Yeah.
Center, and they want to take you with it. They, as of right now, you wouldn't be covering everyone. It'd probably just be 3 or 4 of the roles. They're going to hire some more understudies, and that was it. That was the thing. So I didn't have to audition for my Broadway debut. We just transferred with the show and added 7 more understudies to the team besides Jason Forbach and myself. And
Yes.
then I made my Broadway debut as the baker's wife, which
Oh
is
my
just,
gosh.
yeah, it still makes me think like, oh gosh, I can't believe I got to do that. Even now that the experience has been over for a year, it's like, I can't believe that happened.
Well, I feel like the takeaway, like the main takeaway from that goes back to the beginning when like you said you like hadn't heard from anyone after sending in tapes and you're like, well, and you reach back out. That is
Yeah,
like that's what made everything happen, which like goes to show
totally.
I feel like it's a fear for most people to reach back out.
Yeah,
But
there's definitely a level of vulnerability to that, but it can't hurt. It certainly
yeah,
can't hurt.
it's like they can
Yeah.
either there's like two answers really that they can give you when you reach
Right.
back out for something.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's a really good point. Thanks for
Yeah.
reminding me of that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I needed to hear
Yeah,
that. I was
yeah,
like, okay, noted.
yeah. Mutual
Definitely
lesson for
gonna
us and
be a
for the
little
group.
less
Yeah.
nervous to do that
Yes.
because
Yes, yes,
if it
yes.
makes things happen. But
It does. And it
also,
did.
yeah, also you were saying that you didn't go on for encores, but like still you had to be prepared.
I did. Yeah. There was one day when I thought I might be needed to go on for one of the stepsisters, but I think at that time we didn't know that we were going to be transferring to Broadway, and everyone was just really adamant about doing all the performances since it was such a short run. So she pulled through. She did message me one night and was like, I might be out tomorrow, just so you know, like start looking over my stuff. And I did, and I would have been ready, but yeah, I just got to
Hey,
chill. Mm-hmm.
hey, but Broadway debut in that huge show as the baker's wife,
Yeah.
you got
Yeah.
to perform for like a a huge group of super theater fans.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
what was that experience like for you? Do you remember the day you made your Broadway debut? Because I remember I saw it when Stephanie J. Block had taken over for Baker's Wife.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then I got to see, and then I saw you as Baker's wife. I like walked in and I was like, ah, yay.
um, I do remember my debut. So we as the understudy team really were like also the rehearsal team for all of the new people that kind of came in, and we had a lot of turnover within the principal company just because all of those people are very busy.
Yeah.
So Gavin needed a couple of weeks off to go and workshop his musical, Walk On Through. That's what's called? Yes, Walk On Through. And so he was going to be gone for 2 weeks, and they brought Cheyenne Jackson in to play Cinderella's prince for those 2 weeks. And so they had asked me, we had a matinee, and during the matinee, I was called to rehearsal with Cheyenne to like get him ready for all of the baker's wife scenes that happened between Cinderella's prince and the baker's wife. So I spent the day in rehearsal, and as I was in there, like I kept noticing the stage management team that was with us in the rehearsal room kept kind of like going into the corner and like conferring and kind of writing some things. You know, at one point, one of them stepped out of the room on the phone, and I was like, something's going on. So then I'm getting done with rehearsal. I'm walking back over to the theater because we were only just like right down the street for the rehearsal hours. And I got a text from our stage manager that was like, hey, Sarah's out tonight. You're going to make your debut. Is that cool? I was like, of course it's cool. I would
Yeah.
love to. So I messaged all the people that told me they needed to know when I was going to be on for the first time. And had a really great turnout of some incredible New York friends that came to see me do it. And I think because I'm telling you, that experience that I had on the tour that was just so much made it so that I could really enjoy my debut. I wasn't freaking out. I've done this role before. I had plenty of time to get familiar with the material. And so I just kind of got to be present in it, which I don't know that many people in my situation would be able to say that. So it was so great to just be able to like act with Brian and to be able to really lean into the songs that I got to sing and like really tell the story and not be so worried about like, oh, I hope I get the lines right. Oh, I hope I'm standing in the right spot or I pick up the right prop or whatever it is. I just wasn't thinking about any of that. And I just got to be an actor within the company. And it was so special. Really, really special.
You got to show off too. So like
I
with
think a little bit. Yeah, I think I
yeah.
did get to show off a little bit. And that role is just so great for me, which makes me excited because it means, I mean, I'm a little too young for it technically. So
Yeah.
the fact that I can continue to play it and other roles that are similar to it for like years to come is really exciting to me.
I mean, it's cool that like out of all of the roles that you were covering, you got to that was your Broadway debut.
That was the one. Yeah. And we kind of had a little bit of a hierarchy within the understudies so that we all knew what we should be focusing on. And I was like the first Baker's Wife cover. So I really was in the building just to do that. I did go on for Little Red and Cinderella, but just once for each role. But I was on for the Baker's Wife like almost 30 times. So
Wow.
yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you how do you go about making a role like that your own when you're stepping into it and like
Mm,
people have seen multiple casts in the show. Like
yeah.
I feel like the reason people see shows multiple times is to see like different people make the characters their own, which is fun.
Absolutely. I think that's true. I think so just looking at Into the Woods specifically, of the entire of the show, the baker and the baker's wife, I think, are the most human characters. Everybody else has kind of a level of fantasy to them, either that or they're literally directly out of a fairy tale. And I know the baker and his wife are out of a fairy tale as well, but they're just normal people in that fairy tale as well. Where, we have Cinderella with all of her birds, and we've got the witch with all of her magic powers, and the princes that are like caricatures of humans. And so I think what's really great about the baker and the baker's wife is that you just get to bring as much of yourself and as much humanity as possible to them, because they really are sort of the relatable anchors of the show, whereas everything else is pretty fantastical and sometimes really silly. Like those two just want to have a baby together and they're kind of trying to save their marriage, which is like incredibly relatable. I think to anyone sitting in the audience, like, oh, I want this thing and I have to work with this other person to get it. So I think it was just leaning into a lot of what it would mean for me, Kate, to be in these experiences and also to allow myself to enjoy the comedic moments as well. Because what's so great about The Baker's Wife is her pragmatism. And because she's so grounded and so pragmatic, she's hysterical in comparison to everyone around her that's so ridiculous and heightened. Her realism is really fun to lean into. So I think I tried to give myself as much freedom with that as I could. And Brian was the best scene partner in the world. So he made all of it so easy.
Well, I feel like, I mean, talked to a lot of people who do like parodies and stuff in LA, and
Oh,
like
totally.
comedy they say is the hardest genre
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
tackle. But maybe does it make your job like easier to have like a bunch of people on stage who are also really good at comedy?
I think so. I think so. And I also think that like we were able to play off of each other. I did the role often enough. Obviously, I wasn't on every night, but I did it often enough that we got comfortable with each other's beats and moments and were able to kind of make something fun out of it. And I think that comedy in musical theater specifically, you have to be having fun too while it's happening. So
Yes.
it can't just be about like making the audience laugh. You also we have you need to be having a good time in the moment. So we definitely achieved that. We had a
The
great time.
audience needs to see that. And like, how can you not have a good time when the two princes are being like the funniest humans in the world?
Yes. Yeah. Just hysterical. They were so good. It was so fun to watch them do that every night.
So good. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I was very honored to get to see you in that show on Broadway.
I'm so glad that you could. Thank you.
And I got to see you in that show after I saw you in Les Mis, which so I saw you on the Les Mis tour as Fantine in
Yes, you did.
before the pandemic.
Uh-huh.
What was your audition process like for that show?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I was doing the Into the Woods tour, the first one, and I remember seeing on Playbill. No, actually, I got an appointment through my first agent was like, "Hey, now this was pre-COVID days, so their self-taping was not anyone's friend. They didn't like that. We were in San Francisco with the Into the Woods tour, and I got this appointment to go in for the Les Mis tour in person in New York in like the following week to be in the ensemble." And I was like, oh, I could do this show. That would be easy, to be in the ensemble and then to understudy Fantine.
Yeah.
So at the time, the person that was playing the witch in our production of Into the Woods was dealing with some health issues. And so she wasn't doing the show very much. I was going on like sometimes 7-8 performances a week, which was very tiring. And so in the midst of all of that, I'm spending a lot of time on stage during the show. I did a cross-country flight to New York, did my initial audition, thought it went pretty well. Another cross-country flight back to San Francisco to go back to tour and start performing again. And I got a call back and was like, great, I have to go back to New York. So I did like a week of performances, was so exhausted, had to take a red-eye flight at the end of a 5-show weekend to go back and audition for the show. Like I flew overnight, landed at like 7 a.m. and went to the audition. It was absolutely awful. And it was a bad audition. I like was exhausted. I knew as soon as I walked out of the room that I didn't get it. I was like, oh gosh. And I know that I can do this material so well, but I'm just too tired. I'm so tired. It was really not a good showing. So I got back to the tour and was bummed for quite a long time that I had lost this opportunity because I thought the first audition had gone so well and it seemed like they really liked me. And I was really upset. I was really upset for a while. Even just talking about it right now, I remember that feeling. And then we finished the Into the Woods tour and I'm back in New York and doing some random auditioning here and there. And I get an email from my agent. And this was like at the end of the day on a Friday that the Les Mis team wanted to see me again on Monday in a couple of days for ensemble, understudy Fantine, and the Factory Girl, which was different than the last time. So I had to learn a little more music than I had learned before. Went in and it was a final callback, which I was like, whoa, wasn't expecting this. There was like 10 people seated behind a table. They had a big camera set up with like a light. It was really intense. Did the audition. I was rested, so it felt great. Left the room, found out 2 days later that I had booked it. And then I was in the rehearsal room 2 weeks after that. So I don't know, something, they must have found someone that they liked and offered them the role and they couldn't do it anymore or what. But the stars aligned just perfectly for me to then join the company. And I remember sitting in the rehearsal day, like the first day of rehearsal in the room, thinking like, oh man, I was so sad that I wasn't going to have the opportunity to do the show. And now look at me, I'm here, I'm doing it. So I spent the first 6 months of the tour in the ensemble playing the Factory Girl and covering Fantine. And then Melissa Mitchell, who was playing Fantine at the time, decided she didn't want to stay with the tour after her 6-month contract was up. So they approached me about going back to New York and re-auditioning for the team to take over the role. And I was like, of course, I would love to do that. So this time they flew me to New York and I got to see the directors again and I sang through the material. And then I had to do one more round of taped auditions that they sent to Cameron McIntosh in London that he had to approve. And then I was like, I know it was a lot of like, okay, we get it. Cameron McIntosh, you're like making me audition 3 times for this role that you could watch archival footage of me doing as the understudy if you wanted to, but whatever, sure. I'll sing the song for you again. And then I got it. I got the promotion. I got bumped up. So 6 months into the tour, I took over and started playing the actual role and did that for 2 years. For 2 years.
Did you have like the tour schedule at the time? So like you knew like what cities it was stopping in? Because I
usually, yeah.
in LA, that's so cool.
Totally. Absolutely. We knew the first full year of tour dates. They usually put them out a year at a time. So like on MJ right now, we don't know what the second year is quite yet. They're going to hopefully give us that soon. I would like to know what that's going to look like. But yeah, it was wild. It was a wild experience. So all in all, I auditioned like 7 times for Les Mis, you know, from the very first audition to the very last one that I did to play Fantine.
Oh my goodness. And I also noticed last time I saw Les Mis that like I hadn't noticed it before that Fantine is in like other scenes.
Yes. Yeah.
I was mind blown.
Totally. Well, it was Haley Dorch, right? You saw her here. Yeah, she is the sweetest girl in the whole world. But yes, she because of her stature, I feel like she would be so easy to pick out in the ensemble scenes. Whereas for me, they threw a brown wig on me and like kind of shoved me in the back, and you would never have known. Really? Even my own parents would be like, "We know she's in the barricade scene, but we can't find her."
They're like, wait, they're looking the whole time, not paying attention.
Could be her, who knows? Any one of us.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, I mean, you technically get to be like multiple characters in the show still. You technically get to be like part of the little after Fantine.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was honestly, that was probably my favorite track that I've ever done, just with the way that it was set up. Like you get shot out of a cannon right at the beginning of a show because it's like straight into the depth of the sadness of your story. Like immediately, she doesn't even get like a small chance to be happy. She's just sad from the beginning.
It's awesome.
Yeah, but then you get to have like that great dock scene, and then you get to like die dramatically in a bed. It's so awesome. And then you get to go off stage for like 45 minutes and eat your dinner in your dressing room and just hang out. And then they put a brown wig on you and you go mess around with everyone in the ensemble scenes, like in the barricade and Monday More. And then you get to be a pretty ghost at the end. So it was great. It was great.
Oh my gosh. How do you bring the like vulnerability to Fantine, but also bring that vocal power?
Well, my voice teacher was always like, don't let your voice do the acting everywhere else, because I think the trap that Fantines probably fall into is that they're trying to make it sound sad and intense, but like the music that Fantine sings is just dramatic. It's beautiful and dramatic, so you can lean into the lyrics and the lyricism and then let your face and your body tell the rest of the story. So that was always my goal, was to just like let it sound the way it's supposed to sound. People are interested in hearing I Dreamed a Dream sung beautifully, so let that happen. And then, you know, as things start to kind of fall apart for her in the scenes after that is when you can like really have a lot of physical vulnerability, which was my goal.
Yes. I feel like even at the the ending scene with John as the ghost, like that's the scene that gets me every time when
oh God, I loved doing that scene. It was so fun. I know, but you don't have to, if it's good writing, and that part of the show I think is written so beautifully, you can let the material do it for you, and it does. The material and the lights and the costumes and the simplicity of the set at that moment, I think that all just works together nicely. So I really just had to make sure I was walking nice and slow as I make my entrance, and singing the right notes and saying the right words and like imbuing it with a little bit of emotion. But otherwise, I mean, that will always get people, I think, just because of all of the elements coming together to make it effective.
Oh my God. And just like this, just the story by that point is just like,
I know
so much has happened.
You've gone through so much as an audience member in the show, and so you need that last scene to just be like, okay, yeah, go to heaven, bro.
Is there any point during like while Fantine's on stage where it's like almost pitch black? Because I don't know how actors navigate the stage when it's like that dark on stage. with the
That's a
mood
great
light?
question. I feel like the darkest that it was is right after the factory scene before I Dreamed a Dream, where he's like, right, my girl, on your way, and grabs me and would like throw me upstage. But I think because I was sort of the centerpiece of that and the lights are going down, it wasn't really on me to avoid other people. It was on everyone else to like avoid me. So I just made sure that I hit my mark. And, we have little spikes and stuff on the stage and get down on the floor the way I'm supposed to start the song and just be there in my blue dress. So they're all like, oh, there's Kate. Okay. Swerve.
Oh my God, I'd
Yeah.
be so terrified that I would like during some quiet moment would like trip and fall and face on the stage. And
I don't think that luckily they never made it like pitch black for us. And if they did, we were always advised to stop moving until the lights came back up. So, like, at the end of One Day More, there is a blackout. And
yes.
we would all hold on to each other in the blackout and back up until the person at the back of the V would hit the back wall. And that's how we knew to stop. And then the scrim would come down. Once we hit that spot where we stopped, we were not supposed to move. So like you just stay where you are, and then the scrim would come down, and then the lights would come up backstage, and then we would all go.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking like Hades somewhere it's like pitch black on that turntable on stage.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Like,
I'm sure that if we were on the stage, it wouldn't seem as black. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think that they take precautions about that, but I know you're right. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Would be like I'm on essentially a treadmill in the dark.
Wild. But you have to like move and walk and no.
Right.
Nope.
Good contacts, I guess.
Could not trust me with that. So before I get into MJ, I'm curious, did anyone who came to Into the Woods on Broadway, did anyone else also like see you on that national tour and like remember you as Fantine on the Les Mis tour?
There were a couple of people who were just fans from Les Mis who like made a point to come and see Into the Woods, which was cool, which is really cool. But for the most part, I think that we were getting a lot of New York theater goers in our Into the Woods audiences. And so not as many, I mean, when you're on tour, you're really playing audiences of people that are all across the country. So for the most part, no. But there was like a little bit of crossover, but not much, no.
Hey, but you get to like get your name out there and be like, I'm gonna make this a memorable performance for all these people.
Exactly right.
Yes. So I want to talk MJ musical, where you're currently on tour in LA.
That's right.
So when did you get the audition or the like call for MJ? And what made you interested in doing this? There's a lot less singing, I feel like, than in past roles that you've done, which is interesting, but a lot of acting.
Yes, a lot of scene work. So I first auditioned for the show in November of 2022. Yes. So it was right towards the end of Into the Woods on Broadway. I was still doing that. And my agent had gotten the appointment request and messaged me and was like, hey, so the team for MJ wants to see you for this role. It's very different than all of the things that you've done before. And it might not be something that you want to do. So like just full transparency. It's kind of like a sideline principal character. There's not a ton of singing, but here's the material, like take a look at it. And I ended up at that time, because I hadn't been auditioning for many other things, was like, I mean, it's Telsey, it's a great casting office. I want to have good audition experiences with them. So I might as well, if they're asking for me specifically, I'll go in and we'll see how it goes. And as soon as I left the room for the very initial audition, I was like, I'm going to book this. I can feel it. I'm not sure why I feel that way, but I think I am. And I ended up having another 2 rounds of auditions after that first one. And the second round was more of like a work session with the associate director and with the casting team. where we just kind of, I sang through some of the stuff, we went through some of the scenes, and we just talked a lot about the character and about what's going on in the scenes before and after. And she, Dante, who's our associate director, was very much like, hey, this is just an opportunity for us to get to know each other, for you to get more familiar with the material, to ask questions. This is not really like an audition. It's just to prepare you for the final that you're going to have, which was cool. It was really nice to just have kind of a constructive environment to work on the stuff. Um, because Rachel's kind of a weird role. She's a little tricky in that, like, it could be nothing. It could kind of be a nothing role that's just there to ask questions, or you can find some layers and some depth to it. And I think she was really helpful in that session to sort of start parsing through where I could turn it into something a little bit more meaty and like with a little bit more depth. And so then I had my final callback right before Christmas, and I remember it going very well. I sang Celine Dion.
Hey!
Hey, and when I got done, Christopher Wheeldon was like, "Can we add that song to the show?" And that's when I knew, I was like, okay, he likes me. This is great. Um, and then left the audition and was like, okay, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And I didn't end up hearing officially until the first week of January. That tends to happen over the holidays. But my agent did say, they essentially contacted me immediately after you left the room to be like, we want her to do it. We just don't have the contracts yet. And so it's not necessarily that like the role spoke to me that much in the way that the other shows that I've done did, but it's what we were saying at the beginning of this chat, that like everything kind of happens for a reason. And when stuff falls into place so easily and so kind of like synchronistically, I was just like, I think I'm supposed to do this. I don't exactly know why, because it is so different from the previous shows that I've done and sort of the direction that it felt like my career was going in. But the truth of it is that this just adds diversity and a little bit of range to the things that I've done. And it has been a really wonderful just experience personally, because I've loved meeting all of these people and being in a predominantly Black cast. I've learned a lot about a culture that is not my own and have been welcomed into the community in such a wonderful, loving way. And because the show is asking something different from me than other shows that I've done, I'm able to lean a lot more into my confidence as an actor on stage every night. I already know I can sing. I know that I'm good at that, but it's nice to be able to take on something that is a little bit more story focused.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, and you're basically, as Rachel, you're basically driving the story of the
Yeah.
show the entire time.
Right. Yeah. There wouldn't really be a plot if I wasn't there to ask questions. So
No. And
or to see things I wasn't supposed to see.
yeah, and I feel like you also are like part of the reason, like when intermission comes, people are so eager for Act Two to start because they're like, wait, what's gonna happen next?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
What are
that's
we?
good. That's very affirming. Thanks for telling me that. Sometimes I wonder, because I feel like the meat of the stuff that I get to do really doesn't happen until the second act, and the first act feels just like exposition for everyone. Really, we're like the entire act is sort of setting the stage for what's going to happen in the second act. But it's nice to know that it's translating in a way where the audience is like, okay, let's see what's about to go down. Something's going to go down. What's it going to be?
It like makes you like, once Act One ends, you can't look away from the stage. I mean, you can't look away during Act One at all, honestly, because so much is happening on that stage.
It is so much going
like, on. This is live theater. I don't know what a Michael Jackson concert was like, but I feel like is so like the whole show is so close to watching a Michael Jackson concert.
Yes.
Stage.
Yeah.
But like it gives you a glimpse of his life as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what my parents said when they saw the show. They were like, I kind of kept forgetting that I was at a musical, that's cool. I mean, I think that we've almost in a way created a different genre of show because it's not quite a concert, not quite a jukebox musical.
The story of itself, but it's also like just
like
a bunch of elements.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What is
It's
the
like a
most
play within a Michael Jackson concert.
Yeah, yes.
Hmm.
And I mean, I feel like you're like, well, people know I can sing now, so like here's my acting. And
Yeah.
it
Yes.
opens like especially in LA, it opens up a whole new door and a whole new world.
That's the hope. Yeah. And we've had a lot of really influential and important audience members from the industry here come and see the show. So, if anything, and someday I'm auditioning for one of them, they'll be like, "Oh, you were that blonde reporter in that show that I saw that one time." Like, yeah,
Yes.
that was me. Yeah.
So what's the most fascinating thing throughout your MJ journey so far that you've learned about Michael Jackson's life that you might not have known before?
Ooh, most fascinating thing. Well, I feel like my I didn't know much about Michael Jackson. I will say, I will admit to you that I was not a fan of his the way that other company members are. I've always loved his music. But I was born in 1991, so like a little after the height, like the pinnacle of his career, which really happened in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I didn't have, obviously, I appreciated the Jackson Five, but I didn't grow up with them the way our parents' generation did. So it was more like, oh, listen to this fun throwback music, as opposed to like watching him grow up. I think was a very specific experience for a lot of people in previous generations. Um, so a lot of what we learned in rehearsal was new information to me. But I did listen to, if anyone's like interested in Michael Jackson's timeline, in all of like the controversy surrounding him, but also in like his creative genius, there's this really great audio. It's almost kind of like a podcast, but you can find it on Audible or Spotify, and it's called Think Twice. And it is this really great, it's like a full timeline of his entire life. It's 10 episodes long. And I was very good, Rachel, and I listened to the whole thing and did some of my
Your
own
research?
research. Yeah. There's so much in there. I mean, just really interesting information that I think puts what our show touches on, his relationship with his father and how that affects him later on in his life, and how it affects his music and how he sees himself as an artist. All of it, kind of the dots are connected in that podcast. So I highly recommend listening to it if you have any interest at all.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, okay, noted right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Think
Definitely
twice. It's so
interested.
great. Hmm.
Like that show takes you on such an emotional journey. You want to know everything, really.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
And you're
It's
kind of like the center of the vulnerability in Act Two.
mm, yeah, just because I have been let into the world just a little bit, and I'm also not a part of the world. I think that's what's special about the role, is that I almost feel like I represent the audience, or like public opinion at the time about him and about his life. And so it's just an important perspective, I think, to have on stage amidst the, like, if we're walking into a rehearsal room where all of these people have worked with Michael Jackson, they all have a very specific opinion of him, they're all close with him, or they've worked with him before, they're part of the world. And myself and Alejandro are sort of like the outliers that are trying to come in, and they just have it's easier to have a different perspective of what's happening, or to see it through very realistic gaze, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, no, absolutely. So I don't think it takes much convincing to get people to a musical about Michael Jackson.
No.
But if you had to convince theater fans and people who
Mm.
like my parents to come to Michael Jackson to the MJ the musical,
Mhm.
how would you convince them to come see the show on tour?
I think I would say that the music stands alone, as, if nothing else, if we weren't doing any of the scenes in between the songs, the show would still be incredible, because the music, it just speaks for itself. So then to be able to have really incredible performances just company wide is sort of like the icing on the cake. So like you said, it's a very nostalgic experience for a lot of people in previous generations, because it's essentially a Michael Jackson concert. And you're not going to get that live anywhere. You might be able to find some YouTube videos, but that we really do, I think, recreate a lot of the energy that existed in his live performances at the theater every night. And then on top of that, it's just, it might not be what you expect from a normal musical, because you're still going to get scene work, but it's just a different kind of story, and everyone who tells the story in the company is so great at what they do. So I think that's what I would say.
Yes. I'm so excited because I have a friend out here in LA who's not a theater fan as like
Uh-huh.
I am, but she was texting me. She's like, "When are we going to see it?" So we're
Hey.
yeah, next Thursday
Okay, amazing. I'll
together.
get to see you again. Good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Love that.
I'm very excited she's going to a show with me.
And I think that's what this show does. I would not be surprised if the majority of the audiences that we have coming to see us on tour so far are like not your typical theater going audience.
Yeah.
And they, like I said, I don't think that they're getting a typical musical either. It's a very specific kind of theatrical experience for
Oh my
sure.
gosh. It's great. You can't stop thinking about it after you see it. So
Love
I'm
that.
yeah. And gonna start like wrapping up because I
Okay.
know you have other things to do in your day. But I am curious, since you've done so many tours, what is something that someone wouldn't know about being on tour?
Mm. Well, I think that a lot of the things that happen on tour probably are not common knowledge. It's like, it's we're such a fine, a well-oiled machine out here on the road, where like, we roll up to a city and we've got company housing and we've got company transportation and travel days and rehearsals and 8 shows a week and acclimating to new cities. And um, I guess if you're ever sitting in an audience watching a tour that's come through your hometown, just know that there quite a lot of sacrifice on each person's part has gone into this to make the show happen for you. We are taking care of ourselves as much as we can outside of the theater. We are enjoying cities as much as we can, but at the same time, like, it's already hard to be a performer, so to do 8 shows a week and then to pick up and travel to a new city and do another 8 it's a lot. So yeah, I guess maybe it would just be that sort of the awareness and the appreciation of what it takes to do a tour. That I think I would imagine that normal audience members maybe wouldn't think about that when they're sitting in the audience watching the show, because
They're
their
just like,
experience is happening like that. I mean, it's like, oh
yeah,
gosh, so much has gone into this.
yeah, they're just like there for like their entertainment value, but like
Yeah. And
there's
it's
like
over
no,
in 3 hours. But for us, it is forever. Like when you're on tour, you're kind of always at work, because you're living in the same place as the people that you work with, and they're really the community that you have. And so, yeah, it's nonstop for us.
yes. Oh my God. And like even Broadway too. I mean, I know
Totally.
tour adds an extra layer with like traveling, but
Yeah,
even Broadway, 8 shows a week is insane.
that it is. It really is.
You have to
But
get everything done before like that night
yep.
because like, oh, it's show number like 6 tonight or something.
Right. And like try to rest somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yes. So before I ask my last question, where can people like follow you on social media to like
Mm-hmm. I'm an old school girly, so I only have an Instagram.
it's the best
Uh,
platform.
I think it is too, and I just know that if I got any of the other ones, I would spend even more time on my phone. I don't need to be doing that. So, but Instagram, my handle is M Catherine Moore, and that's where you can find me. Mm-hmm.
And I'll put that in the description and like in the lower thirds.
Yeah.
And kind of last question is,
Mm-hmm.
what advice would you give to like young performers or up and
Ooh,
coming performers in this industry who are like
yeah.
trying to get that experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, if my story in the theater industry so far can be a lesson at all, it's just that you have to trust where you are at any given moment and know that what you're experiencing is happening for a reason, which then I think gives you a lot of flexibility to not worry about the future and not really worry about what's going to happen, and instead just focus on your own integrity as an artist, because that's really all that we can control. So rather than, I think about all the energy that I've wasted worrying about the job that I was or wasn't going to get, and being afraid of what the team is going to think of me, and or what my peers might think of me, or whether I'll make it, or whatever it is. And all of that energy can instead be put to so much better use, just focusing on what you love about performing and really trying to hone whatever that is. So if it's singing a particular material, or if it's doing a certain kind of show, then like really lean into that and find a lot of integrity within the art form itself. Focus on your training, focus on all the things that you can control, and then just be open to whatever will come of it.
Yes. And I feel like, I mean, you're proof that amazing things come from it, from like following your heart, being like, okay, I'm gonna give this a go.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, oh, this doesn't feel like it's working out, and I'm so bummed about it. And then all of a sudden it does work out, or it works out in a way that you couldn't have even imagined that it was going to work out. And I think that there's just a lot to be said for trusting where you are in the moment and knowing that you are where you're supposed to be.
Yes. Oh my God. And it's easier said than done, but yes, absolutely.
Totally. I have to remind myself of it constantly, but luckily I have real life experience to be like, hey, remember that time that you were really stressed about this, and then everything worked out the way it was supposed to. So I try to remind myself of that as often as I can.
Yes. So, I mean, such a good note to end on, I feel like. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I can't end without saying like Wicked someday, maybe.
Are you requesting that? Sure. But what Wicked? Who am I playing?
Well, I have an idea, but like Elphaba?
Okay, I mean, I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say no. We'll see. It's been a long time since I auditioned for that show. But it always comes back around.
I can see it happening someday. So I'm like gonna manifest that, since we've manifested the Titanic stuff. And
thanks, Becca. Okay,
of
great.
course.
I'll accept that. I'll accept that manifestation.
Hey, you're fabulous. So
thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course.
Very excited we could make this work out, and
me too.
I feel lucky that I've gotten to see you in a lot of shows.
You really have, and I love it too. It's so nice to have such lovely friendships from all of the performing experiences that I've had.
Thanks for watching this episode of Backstage with Becca B. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Becca B Talks TV. Or for more exclusive content from this interview and more, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Backstage with Becca B. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and give me a 5-star rating. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.